And now, for your holiday enjoyment, a special Independence Day program. I Love America.
God bless America.
Hello and welcome to this special Independence Day program. I'm Jerry Stewart. Today is the day set aside in our America to be so very thankful. For what? For having our America. To be proud to be Americans. To remember those gone before us who worked so hard, fought hard, even died for our cause of freedom. Here's how the 56 signers to our Declaration of Independence said it. Just above the signatures on the actual Declaration of Independence, it says, "For the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Simply said, they pledged to each other all things they had, all they were, and they were trusting that Almighty God was with them to help them see it through. Wow. Take a moment and let those words sink in. These 56 signers, just regular folks like you and me, they not only devoted themselves to a free and better America, they were even willing to die. And we need to be reminded of their great sacrifice. So what are we to do today? We are to celebrate, to have parades and fireworks and barbecues, to sing songs, tell their stories and remember, and most of all, to pray for God to lead us in our great part for now and the future of America. And just what exactly is our part for our America today? Well, I believe, first of all, we are to love our America. Do you love America? I do. And if you do, then ask yourself this question: what am I doing to show my love for America? Well, what we love, what we cherish, we do these things. We keep it safe and watch over it. We keep an eye to make sure that someone or some group of someones are not working to seriously harm or destroy this thing we love. We honor it. We respect it. We teach and train our children. And finally, most importantly, we pray. Our founding fathers prayed for God's help to make this America work. And we need to pray for God to lead us, to show us, to help us, to strengthen us as we keep America going. And today, we'll be having some great stories, true stories of our America and those gone before. There was one young boy, his name was Abe. He lived in a small town in America back in the 1800s. And one day, he did something so powerful, all on his own, something so truthful and honest, that the people in his town never forgot. They even gave him a nickname, Honest Abe. And that name stuck with him to this very day. It's a great story of the power of honesty. And here's a good story I bet you haven't heard. We all know Paul Revere. We all remember the story of how he did his midnight ride to warn everyone that the British were coming. But in my story today, you're going to find that there was another rider, and that this other rider, a young girl, rode more miles that night than Paul Revere. I have so much to tell you, so many stories and facts to share with you. So grab up the family, get a good spot to listen as I share why I love America. It was all the way back in May of 1888 when a son was born to a poor Jewish family living in Russia. They named him Israel Isidore Bellini. His mother and father had heard about this wonderful nation, America, and when Isidore was 5 years old, they immigrated to America to find their own American dream. But sadly, 3 years after coming to America, Isidore's father died, and his family was left with the real possibility of starving to death. So Isidore had to work just to survive. At only 8 years old, he took any job he could find. He started off selling newspapers and found himself doing street performances like singing and dancing. And finally, he landed a job in a restaurant as a singing waiter. Well, one day, he was asked by his boss, the restaurant owner, to write a song for that cafe. It seemed that the rival cafe had written a song and had it published. His boss needed his own song for his restaurant, so Isidore, now a young man, wrote a song, and soon it was published. Now, for writing that song, Isidore was paid 37 cents. Yep, 37 cents. But something happened with that song that changed Isidore's life forever. On the published sheet, they misspelled his name. Worse than that, they got his name all wrong. And when Isidore got the copy of the published song, he was shocked. And from that moment on, in the musical publishing world, Isidore was forever known not as Israel Isidore Bellini, but as I. Berlin, his misspelled name on that first published sheet music. And this became his public name. Yes, this poor Jewish immigrant who almost starved to death on the streets of New York City became the famous composer Irving Berlin. And he began to work, composing songs for the musical stage in Broadway, and he was very successful. His dream had come true. He was not just living in America, he was writing songs about America. Wow. Well, in 1917, after a number of successful musicals, now at the age of 29, he staged a musical revue for an army base in New York. It was a wonderful patriotic revue and a tribute to our men fighting in World War I. But here's where a very strange twist came to Irving Berlin's story. He had written one song for that musical revue, a highly patriotic song, and he decided at the last moment not to use it. So the sheet music for this song was put away and stored with his other unpublished songs, where it stayed for over 20 years. Little did he know that it would someday be his most popular song ever. Well, 20 years passed. It was 1938. By now, Irving Berlin was one of the most successful and respected songwriters in all of America. But he never forgot where he had come from and just how very blessed he was to live in such a wonderful country, America. Well, one day, Berlin was approached by a man by the name of Ted Collins. He was the manager of one of the great, oh-so-popular singers of that time, Miss Kate Smith. And what Ted Collins wanted Berlin to do was to write a new patriotic song for Kate Smith to sing on her weekly radio program. Believe it or not, Irving Berlin, this man who had written over 3,000 songs, tried and tried and tried to write a special song for Miss Smith. But he got nowhere. He was about to quit, but then he remembered that patriotic song he had written 20 years before and had rejected it. He went to his old trunk of rejected songs, and there it was. And just what was the song? Of course, God Bless America. And when Kate Smith sang that song on her radio program for the first time, the phone lines were jammed with calls from listeners saying that they had to have a copy of that song. Well, the song was published, and it sold millions upon millions of copies. And for almost 3 years, each time Kate Smith performed anywhere, she was asked to sing that song. And each time she was given a standing ovation by audiences, moved to tears by her presentation and the song's simple but powerful words. Wow, what a great story. But there's more to the story. When asked about this song, what did Isidore say? This is the best part of the story. He said that God Bless America was not just a statement, a set of words. It was a prayer. In this song, Irving Berlin was asking God to bless America, land that he loved, to stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. And since that song was written, America has seen many dark days, and each time a dark day has come, Americans all across this great land have turned to this song as an inspiration, as a comfort, as a prayer. So do this for yourself, for your family. sometime today, this 4th of July Freedom Day, take some time with your children, your family, not just to listen to this song, God Bless America, but to sing it out loud, all of you together, and then talk about the words. And when you get to that part, God Bless America, my home, sweet home, make sure that the children know that America is not just some place that you live, not just some place to stay. It is our home. It is our country, we the people, and we should love it. I'm taking a break now, but when I return, I'll tell you the story of the mystery man of Independence Hall. I'm Jerry Stewart. I'll be back after these messages. Hello and welcome back to this special Independence Day program. I'm Jerry Stewart. Of all the studies I've done, the history stories I've read about America, I've had so many things that I've learned that, well, I never knew. Well, a few years ago, someone approached me and asked me the question, where did we get our name America? And you know, with all the times that I had talked with people and had speeches and meetings and times together, no one had asked me that question. Maybe it's because we all maybe assumed that it was a name that was given to us by Christopher Columbus. Yeah, right? No. You say, well, maybe it was the Indians who had the name before we even came. Well, wrong again. Now get this. Actually, America was named for an Italian navigator by the name of Amerigo Vespucci. He was an explorer who made several voyages in the early 1500s, and in 1503, he wrote a book about this new land that Europeans could not even imagine. And because his writings became so popular, interestingly enough, one map maker used his name when drawing out a map of this new world. Well, other map makers followed his lead, and soon the area became known as America. Very strange. But here's where the story becomes even stranger. As explorations flourished, explorers and geographers actually realized that Amerigo Vespucci had made only minor additions to the discoveries of Christopher Columbus, and to name the new lands after Vespucci seemed to be a mistake. But it was too late because it would be too difficult and too costly to go back and change all the maps. So, in reality, our nation and most of the land surface of the Western Hemisphere was named after only a mediocre adventurer, Amerigo Vespucci. Wow, very interesting. And if I may insert here, how many times when we ask our children what their favorite subject is in school, usually the last subject they will mention as one they enjoy is history. When you ask them why, they say, oh, too many names, too many dates, and there's just not very much to be enthusiastic about. Wow. I used to believe that myself until I started doing these programs, and I can tell you now that with each turn of a page of a history book, I find more and more amazing facts. Now, I will also mention here that it is true that so many of the history books that we read in school are mostly dates and names and things that don't really give us the backstory. So if you're interested in really getting some of the behind the story, let me know by going over to my website at www.jerrystewartusa.com. Send me a note, and I will give you some suggestions for interesting history stories to read. Kelly and I have even started a lesson series called Teach the Children Well. And each lesson, each story doesn't seem like a lesson at all. It seems more like an adventure in history to teach us the very most important things of life. Here's one for you. Shortly after America declared its independence, the First Continental Congress commissioned Benjamin Franklin to design just what our nation's national seal would look like. It took him 4 years, But the paper money we have today still carries a lot of his original design. So take a moment, grab a dollar bill, and let's take a look. Now, we call it paper money, but did you know our so-called paper money is not really paper at all? It's a fabric made up of cotton and linen, and that's why we can wash it and it doesn't fall apart. When we get a new bill, it's always so crisp, like it's just been starched. That's because it is starched. They starch it not only to give it that new crisp look, but more importantly, to help make it waterproof. On the front of the dollar bill, you see the U.S. Treasury seal. On the top, you see scales for the balance, a balanced budget. And when you turn the dollar bill over, you see two circles. Both of these together make up the Great Seal of the United States. In the left circle, you see a pyramid. Now look at its sides. The front face of the pyramid is lighted up, but the western face is dark, signifying that our country was just beginning and the western part of our nation had not yet been explored. Very interesting. The top of the pyramid is uncapped, once again signifying incompleteness, that our work as a nation had just begun. Now notice inside the pyramid capstone you have an eye. They call it the all-seeing eye, an ancient symbol for divinity. It was Benjamin Franklin's belief that one man could not build a nation alone, but a group of men with God's help could accomplish anything. How true. Now, do you see the bald eagle? He's holding an olive branch in one talon and arrows in the other. In the eagle's beak, you read the Latin words, E pluribus unum, meaning from many people, one nation. You see, people had come together from all around the world to start this new nation. But just what about the olive branch and the arrows the eagle is holding? What does all that mean? The olive branch is a symbol of peace. That's what our country really wants, peace. That's why his face is turned toward the olive branches. But in the other talon is arrows, 13 total, signifying war, meaning we as a nation want peace, but we're willing to fight to protect our peace. Now, maybe all this symbolism doesn't mean much to us today, but to our founding fathers, these symbols reflected the ideals and principles and beliefs this nation would be built upon. And the 56 signers of our Declaration of Independence said it this way. This wasn't just shallow talk, because as soon as they inked the Declaration of Independence, before the ink could even dry, each of these men had been branded by the king as traitors and were sentenced to die. But there are writings that tell us that that day when they decided to agree and passed the Declaration of Independence, that there was another man there, what has come to be known as a mystery man. President Ronald Reagan spoke about this unknown stranger in a speech given on July the 3rd, 1981, and this is what he said. As the debate raged on for hours, the issue of independence remained in doubt. To sign a Declaration of Independence seemed such an irretrievable act. Then it is said, one unknown man rose to speak. He was neither young nor strong of voice, yet he spoke with such conviction that he mesmerized the hall. He cited the grievances that had been brought upon them at this moment. His voice failing, he said, "They may turn every tree into gallows, every hole into a grave, yet the words of this parchment must never die. To the mechanic in the workshop, they will speak hope. To the slaves in the mine, freedom. Sign that parchment, sign, even if in the next moment a noose is placed around your neck. For this Declaration of Independence will be the textbook of freedom, the Bible of the rights of man forever." It is said that after that powerful speech, the delegates were so inspired that they no longer delayed and each stepped forward to sign. And later, when they wanted to congratulate the stranger for his powerful speech, he was mysteriously gone, and no one ever found out who this man was. Was he an angel sent from God? We'll never know, but we do know this. For our nation to survive today, each of us must step forward, stand up for what we know to be right, and pledge our own lives and sacred honor. I'll be back with more after these messages.
And now we return to I Love America.
Hello and welcome back to this special 4th of July birthday celebration. I'm Jerry Stewart. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love America. I am proud to be an American. I fly my flag every chance I get. I sing the songs of America as loud as I can. I believe in our nation. Now, having said that, I solemnly say this. I believe that there has never been a time in our history when we have been closer to losing our nation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the land will always be here. The buildings, the houses, the roads, the schools. But the heart of our America, what our founding fathers fought and suffered and died for, we are so close to losing it all. And interestingly enough, this idea of saving, of preserving our America is one thing that our founding fathers spent so much time and effort to warn us about. Listen to this story. Back before we declared our independence, before we were even a free nation, there were a group of men who came to be known as the Sons of Liberty. On August the 14th, 1765, these group of men met together. They gathered in Boston under a large elm tree at the corner of Essex Street and Orange Street to protest the newly enacted Stamp Act. Now, the tree had become this rallying point, a meeting place for the growing resistance to the rule of Britain over the American colonies. And from that day forward, that tree became known as the Liberty Tree. It was decorated with banners and lanterns. Assemblies were regularly held under it to express views and to vent emotions. A flagstaff was raised within the tree's branches, and when a yellow marker was placed there, it was a sign that the Sons of Liberty were to meet. When the news of the Liberty Tree spread throughout the colonies, local patriots in each of the 13 colonies formed their own Sons of Liberty group. Well, in those times, holding an unauthorized assembly was dangerous. It carried with it threats of imprisonment or death. But it did not stop those wanting liberty from meeting under that tree. Well, finally, in 1775, a group of British loyalists cut down that tree, and the Patriots were given an ultimatum: stop their rebellion or else. But the people would not stop. And their liberty? They fought. They paid the price. They won. There was liberty. I recently read some pieces written by Thomas Jefferson all the way back then, and what he said about liberty, the defense of liberty, is prophetic. In Defense of Liberty, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them." Wow. In Defense of Liberty, Thomas Jefferson said this: "This democracy will cease to exist when you take away from those who are willing to work and give to those who are not." In Defense of Liberty, Thomas Jefferson said, "My reading of history convinces me that most bad government results from too much government." Thomas Jefferson said, in Defense of Liberty, "The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, get this, to protect themselves against tyranny in their own government." Wow, those are powerful and sobering words. And I believe every word spoken by Jefferson to be just as true today as it was when Jefferson first wrote them. But there's something else that Thomas Jefferson said worth hearing. He said, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just." And get this, that God's justice cannot sleep forever. Folks, I believe with all my heart that one reason, the main reason we are struggling in America so today is that we have forgotten God's part, His great part in our nation. Not just in the growing of America, but in sustaining America. And the further we get away from His ideals, the moral values, the godly convictions our great nation America was built upon, the more of our greatness we are losing. It was Patriot Benjamin Franklin who said it best in a speech to the Constitutional Congress all the way back in 1787. He said, "If a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without God noticing, then surely it is probable that a nation cannot rise without His aid." Today, this day, let us all understand that there is a price to pay for freedom. Let each of us search to find our own liberty tree. I'm Jerry Stewart. I'll be back with more after these messages. Hello and welcome back to the special Independence Day program. I'm Jerry Stewart. Not long ago, I was speaking to one of my listeners, and as we talked, the more we talked, I found myself telling some great stories. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, so many of the greats in our American history. But in the midst of all the great stories being told today about great people, I felt compelled to get a little, off the track. And do what? Tell great stories about people who did amazing things in our America and maybe got little attention at all. It does happen, you know. And why is that important? To remind us all of the famous saying, success is not doing what others notice and consider to be great. Success is doing what we know to be right. And it is oh so important for us to remember that America is we the people, all of us together, just like the song, red and yellow, black and white. We are precious, all of us, in God's sight. So I thought I would bring out a few unknowns for a few good stories. Listen to these. There was a man who was a famous lecturer. His name was Charles Plumb. He had been in the U.S. Navy and he was a jet pilot in Vietnam. And after 75 combat missions, his plane was destroyed by a surface-to-air missile. Plumb ejected and parachuted into enemy hands. He was captured and spent 6 years in a communist Vietnamese prison. He survived the ordeal and became a noted national hero. Well, one day, Plumb and his wife were sitting in a restaurant. A man at another table came up and said, "Hey, you're Charles Plumb, right? You flew in jet planes in Vietnam from the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You were shot down." Plumb wondered how he happened to know who he was. He said, "How do I know you?" And the man replied, "I packed your parachute. Every day, I packed your parachute." Plumb gasped in surprise and gratitude. And a man pumped his hand and said, "I guess it worked." So often there are the people who seem to be doing the little things, but try jumping out of a plane without a parachute. And how about this one? We all know the name Paul Revere. He was a great patriot and certainly played a big part in America winning its freedom. But what we remember most about Paul Revere was his famous midnight ride to warn the colonists that the British were coming. And on the night of April the 27th, 1777, a message was sent that the British Army had made a surprise attack into Connecticut. They had burned the city of Danbury, and now they were on their way, and someone needed to warn the people that the British were coming. Well, Paul Revere and other volunteers mounted their fastest horses, calling the local militia to prepare the battle. The British must be stopped. Now, we all know this, but what you may not know is that only after about 10 miles of riding in the town of Lexington, Paul Revere was captured by British forces. So, if he was captured, who warned the people that the British were coming? Well, there was another rider, a 16-year-old who rode through the countryside all night long, pausing only long enough at each farm to warn of the coming British attack. And all night long, over 40 miles, and the warnings worked. The colonists mustered together enough of their militia to not only stop the British attack, they actually drove them back to their ships in defeat. And just who was this unknown rider? Who was this teenager who covered more ground that night than Paul Revere? Her name was Sybil Ludington. A young girl did her American duty. I like these stories, don't you? Here's another one. Back in the early 1800s, long before any of us were born, there was a young man named Abraham who landed his first real steady job. He was a clerk in a general store. Now, being a clerk in a store back in those days was much different than it is today. First, there were no computers to help keep the record straight. Second, there were no calculators to make sure the accuracy of any sales transactions. And third, and most of all, there were no security cameras or ways to make sure that a clerk was doing the right thing in his job. So a person did not get a job unless they could be trusted. Well, this young man Abe was quite excited about this new job and his prospects for the future. But one day something happened. A woman came into the store, bought some goods, laid down her money, and left. He was pleased with the sale, but later, when the store had closed, the young man counted the sales for the day, and he discovered that the woman had paid too much for her purchase. That really bothered him, but it could be easily fixed. The next day, he could send word out to her by her neighbors of the overpayment. He could even wait until she came back into the store at some future time and then, give her the money back. But he still was bothered. He had her money, and he didn't like that. So that night, after the store closed, Abraham walked to her house and gave the woman her change. After that, when word got around of just what this young man had done, he was given the name Honest Abe. Now, you might be saying, just exactly what was the big deal? He took a few minutes before he went home that night, drove his car by her house, and gave her the corrected change. Why was that such a big deal? Well, good question, but let's take a closer look at the facts of the case. First, remember there were no computers or electric store records to catch errors, so it would be very easy for someone to get away with giving wrong change and keeping it. After all, how could anyone prove it? Second, one part not mentioned yet was the size of the wrong change error. It was only a little over 6 cents. You say 6 cents? 6 pennies? That's nothing. I see pennies on the ground all the time, and I don't even bother to pick them up. Now remember that this was long ago, and a penny was worth much more than it is now today. But it was still a very small amount. But doesn't that make Abe's effort even more honorable? It wasn't the size of the money amount. It was the principle of the fact. He wanted to get her money back to her, no matter how small that amount might be. A small amount could be easily forgotten, but it mattered to Abe. And one other part. The distance to the woman's house was, get this, 4 miles. And of course, Abraham had no car, not even a bicycle. They weren't even invented yet. 4 miles. When's the last time you walked 4 miles at night on a dark road with no street lamps? Getting the picture now? Of course you are. And this young man, this young Abraham, he went on to be the 16th president of our United States. His name was Abraham Lincoln. And just how long did his nickname Honest Abe stick with him? It never left. And we still call him that today. Oh, the power of an honest word. I'm taking a break now, but before I do, let me give you this website address. It's www.jerrystewartusa.com. Why do I give it to you? Because there are so many more stories to hear. And I invite you to come and listen to the great stories of those who love America. I'm Jerry Stewart. I'll be back with more after these messages. Hello and welcome back to this special 4th of July birthday celebration. I'm Jerry Stewart. Today, we've heard some amazing and powerful stories about our nation, America, and those before us who gave everything for the cause of freedom. And the battle for freedom rages on. And as we stand up in our battle for freedom, let us not forget those all around the world who are serving to protect us, to protect our America, all of our military. And let us not forget our law enforcement who are doing their best, putting their lives on the line to keep our cities, our streets safe. But where do we go from here? Can we continue to piggyback on the sacrifices, the efforts of those gone before us? Or is there something that we, each of us, must do? In 1917, Martin Treptow lived in Cherokee, Iowa. He was a barber, a common man. In that year, 1917, our United States was drawn into a horrible war, World War I, and Martin Treptow enlisted. He was a young man with his whole life in front of him, but he signed up to fight. In December of that year, 1917, Private Treptow and his regiment landed in France, and his job was to carry important messages between battalions on the front line. It was a very dangerous job, but Martin took it on. The men in Martin's regiment noticed something about Martin, that he carried a small notebook in his inside pocket. He never talked about his writings, but he was always noting in his diary. Martin Treptow was a good soldier. He did his job well. And on July the 29th, 1918, while carrying a crucial message between battalions under heavy artillery fire, Martin Treptow, a common man, an Iowa barber, Private Martin Treptow, was killed in battle. And when Martin's dead body was found on the battlefield, as they searched through his pockets to find that message he was delivering, instead they found his diary. In that diary, there was a message to be delivered to all of us today. At the top of the front page of his diary, it was titled, My Pledge, and under it, these simple, common, powerful words. He said, America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will sacrifice, I will endure, I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost, as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. Do you have any sense or feeling that America needs you to work, to sacrifice, to endure, to do as if the whole battle for freedom in our nation depends on you? Dear Lord, help us today to do what we must do to save our great nation, America. One nation under God. Well, that's all the show for today. Have a great and glorious birthday, and don't forget to pray for our America. I'm Jerry Stewart saying goodbye for now. May God bless America. May God bless you.